On June 19, 1944, Lieutenant-General Tadamichi Kuribayashi disembarked from a transport plane onto the ash-covered runway of Chidori Airfield in Iwo Jima. The stifling heat enveloped him immediately upon stepping off the aircraft. At 52 years old, this dedicated officer carried orders personally signed by Prime Minister Hideki Tojo, instructing him to defend the 8-square-mile volcanic island with every available soldier until the bitter end. As Kuribayashi took in the desolate surroundings, including Mount Suribachi rising to the south and the black sand covering everything in sight, he grasped the full significance of his assignment. His wife Yoshihite recalled that upon receiving these orders, Kuribayashi had confided that it was improbable even his ashes would return from Iwo Jima. Situated approximately 750 miles south of Tokyo, Iwo Jima held a crucial strategic position between newly acquired American bases in the Mariana Islands and Japan's mainland. The island's 3 airfields allowed Japanese fighter planes to intercept American B-29 Superfortress bombers heading north toward Japan's cities. If the Americans succeeded in capturing Iwo Jima, they would eliminate this early warning system, gain emergency landing strips for damaged bombers, and establish bases for P-51 Mustang fighters to escort bombing missions all the way to Tokyo. Neither Kuribayashi nor the approximately 21,000 soldiers who would eventually garrison the island were aware that they were about to engage in what would become one of the bloodiest battles in United States Marine Corps history. The 36-day struggle highlighted both the futility of Japan's defensive strategy and the remarkable courage of men ordered to die for a lost cause. Kuribayashi's assignment to command Iwo Jima was an honor, but also amounted to a death sentence. On June 8, 1944, he had been granted the rare privilege of meeting Emperor Hirohito just before departing. Historians such as Kumiko Kakahashi have speculated that Kuribayashi may have been deliberately chosen for what military leaders knew would be a suicide mission. He had made powerful enemies within ultranationalist circles that dominated Japanese military policy. During his tenure as deputy military attaché in the United States from 1928 to 1930, Kuribayashi extensively traveled across America, studied at Harvard University, and observed American industrial capacity firsthand. In letters to his wife, he wrote, "The United States is the last country Japan should fight. Its industrial potential is immense, and its people are energetic and versatile." Such insights were seen as defeatist in an era when Japanese military doctrine emphasized spiritual power over material resources. Despite his reservations about Japan's war effort, Kuribayashi approached his assignment with professional dedication and innovative thinking. Upon his arrival at Iwo Jima, he quickly identified the inadequacy of conventional Japanese defensive tactics. The garrison had been instructed to dig beach trenches in accordance with established protocols, defend the shoreline, resist each landing attempt, and perish heroically on the beaches. Kuribayashi promptly halted this work. His observations from American amphibious assaults at Tarawa and Saipan revealed that Japanese beach defenses were obliterated by naval artillery before Marines even touched the sand, leading to futile charges that wasted countless lives without significantly impeding American progress. Kuribayashi envisioned a new strategy for Iwo Jima: defense in depth. This involved constructing fortified positions deep within the island's volcanic rock, designed to withstand intense bombardment and inflict heavy casualties over an extended period. Rather than contesting the beaches, he planned to allow American forces to land, then ambush them from well-prepared positions that would be impervious to naval gunfire and aerial strikes. He directed his engineers to commence building a complex underground fortress system using natural caves and volcanic rock. Approximately 1/4 of the garrison was assigned to excavation work, a significant manpower allocation that drew criticism from lower-ranking officers who felt soldiers should focus on combat training rather than digging tunnels. According to Kuribayashi's former chief of staff, the general often stated that America's industrial capacity far exceeded Japan's imagination, emphasizing that they must prepare for a formidable enemy. Over the subsequent months, an intricate defensive fortification project unfolded. Mining engineers were dispatched from Japan to create detailed blueprints for multiple levels of tunnels, ensuring proper ventilation and minimizing damage from nearby explosions. By February 1945, Japanese engineers had excavated around 18 kilometers of tunnels connecting various defense points across Iwo Jima. Soldiers working on tunnel construction endured temperatures ranging from 30 to 50 degrees Celsius due to the intense heat radiating from volcanic rock, making underground passages akin to stifling ovens where men frequently succumbed to heat exhaustion. Water supplies were critically limited, with rations dependent on submarines and surface vessels risking capture by American patrols. The northern slope of Mount Suribachi alone housed several thousand yards of tunnels. Situated in the northern highlands close to Kita village, the primary command center was situated 20 meters below ground level and featured several interconnected chambers linked by nearly 150 meters of tunnels. Within this facility, Kuribayashi set up his headquarters for strategic planning. The garrison on Iwo Jima reflected Japan's military composition at a late stage in World War II. The main combat unit was the 109th Division, comprising around 13,000 Army personnel divided into two independent mixed brigades. Major General Katao Asuga led one of these brigades, which numbered approximately 5,000 troops, while Colonel Masuo Aikta commanded another brigade with about 27,000 soldiers. Naval forces on the island totaled roughly 75,000 personnel from the 27th Air Flotilla under Rear Admiral Toshino Suka Ikamaru. Unlike seasoned units that had fought in China or early Pacific campaigns, many of Iwo Jima's defenders were newly recruited conscripts with little combat experience. Some of these soldiers were middle-aged reservists drafted as Japan exhausted its available manpower resources. Others consisted of support and administrative personnel hastily converted into combat roles due to the deteriorating strategic situation. Among the key figures was Colonel Baron Takechi Nishi, who headed the 26th Tank Regiment. Born into nobility on July 12, 1902, Nishi achieved celebrity status after winning a gold medal in equestrian show jumping at the 1932 Los Angeles Olympics, befriending Hollywood stars such as Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford. After Pearl Harbor, Nishi felt despondent, recognizing that war with America was strategically unwise but bound by his duty. On July 18, 1944, while en route from Busan to Iwo Jima aboard a transport ship, his regiment's 28 tanks sank when the vessel was torpedoed by an American submarine, USS Kobia. Nishi then traveled to Tokyo to secure replacement vehicles and managed to obtain 22 tanks. During this brief trip home, he visited his horse Uranus, which had carried him to Olympic glory. Despite continuous harassment from American aircraft and submarines in late 1944, defensive preparations on Iwo Jima intensified. Defenders discovered that mixing the island's black volcanic ash with cement produced superior concrete. They constructed pillboxes with reinforced walls up to 4 feet thick, capable of surviving direct hits from naval shells. The Japanese deployed approximately 300 anti-aircraft guns, 33 naval artillery pieces ranging from 4.7 to 6 inches in caliber, 438 artillery pieces, and 69 anti-tank guns. Additionally, Nishi's 22 tanks were emplaced in fixed positions, buried up to their turrets to function as fortified artillery placements. Gasoline-powered generators kept radios and lighting operational underground, while hundreds of concealed artillery and mortar positions were dispersed across the island's terrain. Japanese defensive measures turned every area of Iwo Jima into a lethal trap, vulnerable to fire from hidden positions across the island. Kuribayashi's defensive approach was revolutionary, diverging sharply from established Japanese military practices. He strictly prohibited banzai charges, which had been a hallmark of Japanese defense in the Pacific War, featuring massed frontal attacks that adhered to cultural ideals but yielded no tactical advantage. According to Kuribayashi, hurling oneself at American firepower amounted to senseless death without strategic purpose. Instead, each Japanese soldier was instructed to eliminate at least 10 enemy soldiers before meeting their own end. The aim was not winning the battle, which they knew was unattainable, but inflicting severe casualties on the Americans. This tactic sparked intense disagreements among senior officers. Vice Admiral Sadachi Matsunaga vehemently opposed Kuribayashi's plans and advocated for robust defenses along the beaches to repel an immediate American landing. As a result, Kuribayashi relieved Matsunaga of his command and replaced him with Rear Admiral Ikamaru, who was more cooperative in aligning with Army strategies. By December 1944, Kuribayashi set February 11, 1945 as the deadline for completing defensive arrangements. Despite ongoing disruptions from American submarines and aerial attacks, reinforcements kept arriving until January. The final force numbered around 21,000 to 23,000 troops. Nevertheless, supply deficiencies persisted. Ammunition reserves were only enough for about 60% of what military doctrine recommended for a single division engagement. Food supplies could last no more than 4 months at most, and fresh water was in critically short supply. Roughly 1,500 Japanese soldiers perished when their transport vessels were sunk by American submarines en route to the island. Life on Iwo Jima prior to the invasion was marked by relentless labor, inadequate provisions, and mounting strain. Soldiers resided in caves and tunnels, sleeping atop volcanic rock while enduring air contaminated with sulfur dioxide. The island received its name due to the pervasive volcanic gases that permeated every corner. Beyond scrub grass, there was no vegetation or trees. The relentless heat led to numerous health issues such as heat rash, dysentery, and various tropical illnesses among the soldiers. Medical supplies were scarce, and poor nutrition along with unsanitary conditions resulted in a high death toll from disease before American forces arrived. Despite this hardship, General Kuribayashi shared the same difficulties faced by his men and refused any special privileges. Former subordinates noted that Kuribayashi frequently visited wounded enlisted personnel in hospitals, which was extremely uncommon for an officer of his rank. When water rations were cut back, he accepted the same restricted allocation as a low-ranking private. Throughout this period, Kuribayashi's letters home revealed a deeply contemplative individual who cherished his family and grappled with their future while accepting his own impending demise as a necessary sacrifice. In one letter to his wife Yashii in November 1944, he wrote, "Do not expect me to survive. The enemy may land on this island soon. Once they do, we must follow the same fate as those on Attu and Saipan. Our officers and men understand death very well. I am sorry to end my life here fighting against the United States of America, but I aim to defend this island for as long as possible to delay enemy air raids on Tokyo. Take care of your health and live a long life. The future for our children will be challenging too. Please look after them once I am gone." These words showed that Kuribayashi was fully aware of his fate and the likely outcome of the battle. Starting from June 15, 1944, American B-24 and B-25 bombers conducted a 74-day continuous aerial assault on the island, marking the longest pre-invasion bombing campaign in the Pacific theater during World War II. These strikes managed to create airfields and destroy surface structures, but had little impact on underground defenses. American intelligence significantly underestimated both the defensive preparations and the size of the garrison. Reconnaissance photos revealed cratered runways and ruined buildings, prompting planners to believe that months of bombing had severely weakened Japanese capabilities. However, these estimates drastically undercounted the actual number of troops, which was closer to 13,000 to 15,000. More importantly, aerial imagery failed to detect the extensive network of tunnels beneath the surface. February 16, 1945, marked the start of the final assault phase. The pre-invasion naval bombardment commenced with battleships, cruisers, and destroyers unleashing a barrage of firepower. Major General Harry Schmidt had requested 10 days of heavy shelling, but only received 3 due to adverse weather conditions. During this time, Japanese defenders took refuge in their tunnels, waiting out the onslaught. On February 17, 12 LCI gunboats approached shore to support underwater demolition teams. The Japanese emerged from hiding and opened fire with all available weapons. This resulted in significant damage to the LCI fleet. 1 vessel sank, LC Eminis 449. Several others sustained severe damage, and over 170 casualties were reported. Despite this loss, these actions exposed numerous concealed enemy positions. On February 18, battleships Tennessee and Idaho moved within a mere 25 yards of the shoreline to target specific objectives with pinpoint accuracy. Inside the tunnels, the bombardment tested the resilience and sanity of Japanese defenders as they endured constant tremors from each shell impact. Dust and debris continuously fell from tunnel ceilings, creating hazardous conditions. Soldiers prayed, sat in contemplative silence, or wrote final letters acknowledging their likely fate. Throughout the pre-invasion shelling period, approximately 22,000 shells were fired at Iwo Jima, symbolizing the overwhelming industrial capacity arrayed against Japanese defenders. Nevertheless, Kuribayashi's defensive strategy proved resilient, with underground positions largely surviving intact. At 8:59 on February 19, 1945, the initial wave of Marines from the 4th and 5th Divisions stormed the shores. Amphibious tractors arrived in an unending sequence, one wave following another as they approached the coastline. Beyond the shoreline, the support fleet was vast, stretching to the horizon with hundreds of ships that showcased an unprecedented display of naval might for the defenders to face. The landing craft battled through heavy surf and steep beaches. As Marines leaped from their tractors, they found themselves sinking ankle-deep into loose volcanic sand, making it difficult to advance inland. Vehicles struggled in the soft, unstable ash, unable to maintain traction. Kuribayashi's instructions were clear: allow the invaders to land and overcrowd the beaches before unleashing a coordinated barrage of fire. For nearly half an hour, the Marines encountered surprisingly light resistance as they advanced. When Kuribayashi gave the signal, every artillery piece, mortar, and machine gun position began firing simultaneously. The beachfront turned into a lethal zone almost instantly. Marines scrambled for cover that was not there. Japanese artillery had pre-targeted each sector of the beach, striking with deadly precision. Machine guns swept across the approaches to the terrace, marking the edge of the landing area. By the end of the day, roughly 30,000 Marines had secured a foothold on the island's southern tip. They had isolated Mount Suribachi from the rest of Iwo Jima's defensive network, but at a staggering cost. Over 500 Marines were killed and more than 18,000 wounded during the first day alone. That night, anticipating massive banzai charges reminiscent of earlier Pacific battles, the Marines prepared their defenses. However, Kuribayashi's orders prohibited such attacks, leading to only minor skirmishes that left the Marines bewildered yet relieved. On February 20th, the struggle for Mount Suribachi commenced in earnest as the 28th Marine Regiment initiated a grueling campaign to dismantle Japanese defenses. Marines advanced cautiously, battling yard by yard. They employed flamethrowers to clear bunkers and explosives to seal off tunnel entrances, while using grenades to eliminate defenders within pillboxes. The Japanese soldiers defended their positions tenaciously, withdrawing through interconnected tunnels when conditions became unfavorable, and then resurfacing to launch counterattacks from different angles. Colonel Kanehiko Atsuchi led the defense of Mount Suribachi with a garrison of about 18,000 men, demonstrating remarkable skill and resolve. By February 23rd, after 3 days of relentless combat, a Marine patrol reached the summit of Suribachi. A small American flag was raised at around 10:20 a.m., eliciting cheers from Marines across the beachhead. Later that same day, another patrol brought up a larger flag to replace it. Joe Rosenthal, an Associated Press photographer, captured this second flag raising, which would become one of the most iconic images of World War II. However, for those Japanese soldiers still entrenched in tunnels beneath the mountain, the raising of the flag signified that the battle was far from over. Isolated groups continued to engage American forces underground long after the surface had been declared secure. The primary Japanese defensive positions were located in the northern part of the island, where General Kuribayashi had concentrated his forces and transformed the terrain into a formidable killing ground with mutually supporting fortifications. The northern highlands featured broken ground, ravines, rocky ridges, and numerous caves converted into heavily fortified strongholds. The Marines dubbed these strategic points with names indicative of the brutal fighting conditions: Meat Grinder, Turkey Knob, Hill 382, Amphitheater, Bloody Gorge. Each name represented a network of entrenched positions that had to be taken through direct assault. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions launched simultaneous attacks on these northern strongholds, advancing slowly against fierce resistance. The combat in the northern region of Iwo Jima introduced American forces to the full extent of Kuribayashi's defensive strategy. Positions that seemed destroyed would come back to life with renewed fire as defenders emerged from tunnels to reoccupy bunkers. Specialized tactics were developed for tunnel warfare, including the use of flamethrowers to clear interconnected chambers and explosives to collapse tunnel sections. Flamethrower teams proved crucial despite suffering casualty rates approaching 92%. M4A3 R3 flame tanks were frequently required by Marine tank battalions. By the conclusion of the battle, each day saw between 5,000 and 10,000 gallons of napalm being consumed by the 5th Marine Division's flame tanks. As February transitioned into March, Japanese defensive positions grew more desperate. Casualties escalated daily as food rations dwindled to starvation levels. Water scarcity became so severe that soldiers suffered from dehydration despite constant combat operations. Medical supplies were exhausted, leaving wounded fighters without even basic pain relief measures. Ammunition was running low for certain calibers, yet the resistance persisted unabated. Kuribayashi's tactic of attrition was proving effective. American casualties had already surpassed all pre-invasion forecasts. What began as a 5-day conflict stretched into its 3rd week with no clear resolution in sight. Baron Nishi's tank regiment, having lost most of their tanks to destruction or immobility, fought alongside infantry from established positions within the northern highlands. The presence of Nishi on the island was known by American forces, who attempted to persuade him to surrender through broadcasts, emphasizing the regrettable loss his death would cause to the world. However, he never replied to these appeals. He stayed with his troops throughout their ordeal, maintaining discipline and morale despite worsening conditions until they became futile. Nishi met his end on about March 22, 1945, under unclear circumstances. His body was not identified amongst the thousands of Japanese casualties in the Northern Highlands. Some reports suggest he may have chosen ritual suicide. Some sources suggest that he perished while commanding troops in battle. Nishi was honored posthumously with a promotion to colonel and received the Order of the Rising Sun, 3rd class, along with its gold rays and neck ribbon. By mid-March, American forces had confined Japanese troops to an area less than 1 square mile at the northernmost tip of the island. Despite this, Kuribayashi's command network remained operational, and communication channels were still functioning through the extensive tunnel system. On March 17, General Kuribayashi transmitted his last dispatch to Imperial headquarters in Tokyo. The conclusion of the battle is near. My forces currently number around 400. Our final defensive line has been breached at several points by tanks, which are now advancing on our main stronghold. We will continue to resist. In a message sent to headquarters on March 16, he expressed profound regret. I am deeply sorry for the devastation that must be occurring in our homeland. However, some solace is found in witnessing my soldiers and officers meet their end with no regrets after enduring relentless attacks from superior forces equipped with numerous tanks and subjected to incessant bombardments. The Americans declared victory on March 26, 1945, precisely 36 days after the initial invasion, although sporadic fighting persisted for several more weeks. Japanese soldiers trapped in cave systems continued their resistance, venturing out at night to gather supplies of food and water. To eliminate these holdouts, American troops sealed tunnel entrances with explosives, pumped seawater into underground caverns, and utilized grenades and flamethrowers to clear enemy positions. The last organized opposition ceased when Kuribayashi led a final charge on March 26, which is presumed to have resulted in his death. On March 25, 1945, approximately 300 of Kuribayashi's troops launched a band's attack against the defensive tactics that he had meticulously planned and implemented throughout the campaign. Kuribayashi's remains were never recovered or identified. During this final phase of the conflict, Rear Admiral Ikamaru also lost his life. The casualty numbers stunned both countries involved. The United States suffered a total of 26,038 casualties, including approximately 6,821 deaths. Marine fatalities amounted to 5,931, encompassing those killed in action, died from their wounds, and presumed dead after being listed as missing, which was more than double the number of Marines lost during World War I. Another 209 personnel from Navy corpsmen and medical units assigned to support the Marines also perished. Approximately 19,217 Marines were wounded in action. This battle marked the only major engagement in the Pacific where American losses surpassed those of the Japanese, although Japanese combat deaths were 3 times higher than American fatalities. For Japan, the toll was even more devastating. Out of roughly 21,000 defenders, merely 183 survived the conflict. Only 216 were captured during active fighting. The rest emerged from caves and tunnels weeks and months later. 2 Japanese soldiers continued to hide until January 6, 1949, nearly 4 years after the battle's conclusion, surrendering only after living underground for several years. The strategic importance of Iwo Jima justified the immense cost, although this remained a subject of debate. By war's end, about 22 51 B-29 bombers made emergency landings on the island, saving an estimated 24,761 aircrew members who would have otherwise ditched in the Pacific or crashed while attempting to reach the Mariana Islands. The first such landing was dynamite on March 4, 1945, during ongoing fighting in the Northern Highlands. P-51 Mustang fighters stationed at Iwo Jima began escorting bombing raids over Tokyo and other Japanese cities. The island served as a base for air-sea rescue operations, facilitating quicker response to downed crew members. The Battle of Iwo Jima resulted in 27 Medals of Honor being awarded, the most for any single engagement in Marine Corps history, with 13 given posthumously. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz remarked on the performance of American forces at Iwo Island that uncommon valor was a common virtue among those who served there. The battle highlighted that Japanese troops could inflict severe casualties even when facing overwhelming numerical superiority by their adversaries. Bayashi's defensive strategies demonstrated that resolute defenders in fortified positions could inflict devastating losses on advancing forces. Military strategists estimated that an invasion of Japan's mainland would result in hundreds of thousands of American casualties if the Japanese utilized comparable tactics on a broader scale. These forecasts played a significant role in the decision to deploy atomic weapons against Hiroshima and Nagasaki, instead of proceeding with Operation Downfall, which was planned as an assault on the Japanese home islands. For the families of men who perished at Iwo Jima, the aftermath of the battle brought sorrow without resolution. The majority of those lost were never recovered or identified, leaving their loved ones bereft of tangible memorials to mourn over and visit. This inability to honor the deceased held particular weight in Japanese culture, where proper burial practices are deeply ingrained within Buddhist traditions. Even years after the conflict's end, search teams continued to unearth remains from Iwo Jima's caverns. More than 10,000 soldiers' remains remain interred beneath the island. In the immediate post-war period, the Battle of Iwo Jima largely faded from memory in Japan. The nation was preoccupied with reconstruction following a total defeat and grappling with the devastation caused by atomic bombings and firebombings that claimed hundreds of thousands of civilian lives. Approximately 900,000 Japanese civilians were killed during strategic air raids, while the atomic attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki resulted in an estimated 200,000 fatalities. Against this backdrop, Iwo Jima was but one tragedy among a series of unparalleled national catastrophes. Decades later, historians and filmmakers began to delve into the battle from the perspective of the defenders. In 1970, Yoshi Kuribayashi, representing Japanese families whose relatives had fallen in war, attended a luncheon in Tokyo with American veterans. During her speech, she expressed gratitude for expressions of camaraderie and received a standing ovation. She later participated in both the 1985 and 1995 honors reunions held on Iwo Jima. The 1985 reunion saw former adversaries gather as elderly men, their wartime enmity softened by decades of peace. They walked together over battlefields that had once been sites of fierce combat, sharing mutual respect and remembrance. Japanese veterans guided American Marines through the tunnel networks they had once fiercely defended. American participants then detailed their strategies for neutralizing these defenses. These gatherings were profoundly emotional, characterized by tears, embraces, and shared prayers for those who perished. The veterans discussed finding peace through reconciliation. Similar meetings took place every 5 years, fostering connections between former adversaries. The physical landscape of the island has remained largely untouched since 1945, preserved in its battle-damaged condition. Today, it is officially called Iwo To. Access for civilians is strictly limited to memorial services attended by veterans and families of fallen soldiers. The Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force runs a small naval air station there. Occasionally, the United States Navy uses the airstrip for carrier landing practice. But mostly, Iwo Jima serves as a somber memorial to those who died. Thousands of Japanese soldiers are interred within sealed caves on the island, alongside American and Japanese monuments that stand side by side. Modern historians studying the battle with access to perspectives from both sides have generally reached similar conclusions. Tactically, the engagement highlighted the effectiveness of deep defensive strategies when executed correctly. Kuribayashi's tactics caused significant casualties and prolonged the conflict far beyond initial projections, turning a 5-day operation into a 36-day struggle. Strategically, the island's importance as an emergency landing site and fighter base justified its capture, although discussions persist regarding whether the cost was proportionate to the benefits gained. The battle underscored American industrial strength and logistical prowess, while showcasing Japanese tactical acumen, engineering skill, and the resolve of defenders fighting from well-prepared positions. Cultural remembrance of Iwo Jima varies significantly between the United States and Japan. In America, the battle holds a revered status, epitomized by Rosenthal's photograph and the Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington, Virginia. All Marines are educated about Iwo Jima during training. In Japan, awareness remained relatively limited until 2006, when Clint Eastwood's film, Letters from Iwo Jima, reignited interest in the defender's viewpoint. The movie, filmed in Japanese with Japanese actors, aimed to depict the battle through the eyes of those who defended it. The movie was inspired by General Kuribayashi's published letters, along with Kumiko Kakuhashi's book, So Sad to Fall in Battle. Tactical innovations from the Battle of Iwo Jima had a lasting impact on military strategy for many years. The integration of combined arms tactics became standard procedure. The significance of specialized weapons designed to breach fortified positions was acknowledged. Tunnel warfare techniques were later used in conflicts such as the Vietnam War, where similar underground defenses were employed by the Viet Cong. The battle illustrated that superior firepower and numerical advantage alone could not ensure victory against entrenched enemies. Infantry had to close the distance and destroy them directly. General Kuribayashi's correspondence with his wife Yoshi and children during the American invasion revealed a deeply devoted man who accepted his impending death while hoping it would safeguard his family. In one letter, he articulated the philosophy that guided him. If our children can live safely for another day because of this defense, then every effort is worthwhile. This conviction sustained Japanese soldiers throughout the horrific ordeal. While the battle's strategic value in protecting Japan remains contentious, there is no doubt about the sincerity and determination behind it. The Battle of Iwo Jima represents one of history's most violent conflicts, a 36-day fight where nearly 27,000 men perished or suffered severe injuries on an 8-square-mile island. It highlighted the immense cost of war, the bravery of individuals caught in impossible situations, and the potential for reconciliation even after the cruelest battles. General Kuribayashi, Baron Nishi, Rear Admiral Ikamaru, and countless unnamed Japanese soldiers fought with remarkable courage for a cause that was ultimately futile. Following orders they could not refuse, they died for their homeland, which would be spared by Japan's unconditional surrender 4 months later rather than through their sacrifices. The island itself serves as a memorial to all who fought there, its volcanic rock forever linked to one of World War II's bloodiest engagements. The tunnels once used by desperate defenders now hold only echoes and the remains of those who never left. The shores where Marines battled through the rugged volcanic sand are now tranquil, visited only sporadically by veterans or researchers seeking to honor those who perished there. Lieutenant-General Tadamichi Kuribayashi passed away maintaining the same dignity and devotion he had displayed throughout his life. Though his remains were never recovered, his memory lives on in the letters penned to his loved ones, in the admiration of American Marines who faced his formidable defense strategies, and in the unwavering example he set as a leader who shared every hardship with his troops. Baron Takashi Nishi, once an Olympic champion celebrated in Hollywood, met his end fighting against Americans he had previously referred to as friends, highlighting the sorrowful transformation that war brings about. The 21,000 Japanese soldiers who defended Iwo Jima, most of whom perished within the island's volcanic tunnels and caves, demonstrated unparalleled bravery for a homeland they would never return to see.